State troopers discover a dogman den with half-eaten deer arranged neatly. That's exactly what happened to me in October 2019, and I'm breaking 5 years of silence because cancer has given me 3 months to live. I'm Dennis Volk, 22-year Alaska State Trooper veteran. My rookie partner and I responded to a missing hunter call in the Susitna Valley wilderness. We found massive 14-inch tracks with 3-inch claw marks from something walking upright on 2 legs. The trail led us to a cave filled with dozens of deer carcasses, meticulously sorted and butchered with crude stone tools. Fresh kills were arranged in perfect rows, skulls facing outward in geometric patterns. Then we saw it arranging another carcass 7 feet tall, wolf skull, human hands, moving with terrifying intelligence. It looked directly at us and tried to speak. Federal agents sealed the cave with concrete within 48 hours and buried our report. But what happens when you realize something far older than us has been watching from the shadows all along? The morphine drip makes everything soft around the edges, but it can't touch the memories. They're still sharp as broken glass, cutting through the fog of medication whenever I close my eyes. The nurses here at Providence Medical Center in Anchorage think I'm having nightmares when I wake up gasping at 3 in the morning. They're wrong. Nightmares are things your mind creates. What I see when I close my eyes, that actually happened. For 22 years, I wore the badge of an Alaska State Trooper. And for 22 years, I kept my mouth shut about things that weren't meant for official reports. But pancreatic cancer has a way of clarifying your priorities. The doctors give me 3 months, maybe 4 if I'm lucky. Lucky. That word doesn't mean what it used to. I'm breaking a 5-year silence because the public deserves to know what really happened to Thomas Brennan in October 2019. Not the sanitized version about a rabies outbreak that you might have seen buried on page 6 of the Anchorage Daily News. The truth. The truth about what's living in the Susitna Valley, 40 miles northwest of Talkeetna, in caves that have been there longer than any of us have been keeping records. You need to understand something about me first. I wasn't some rookie who spooked at shadows. I'd been with the troopers since 1997, working out of Wasilla, Palmer, and finally the Mat-Su Valley. Before that, I did 4 years with the Marines, Operation Desert Storm, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. I'd seen men die in combat. I'd pulled bodies from frozen rivers during spring breakup. I'd walked into meth labs where paranoid cooks pointed sawed-off shotguns at my chest. Once, I had to put down a rabid grizzly that had killed 2 hikers near Hatcher Pass. It stood my ground at 15 feet, while it charged, put 3 rounds from my 10mm into its skull before it dropped. None of that prepared me for what I found in that cave. The call came in on October 23rd, 2019, at 0800 hours. Routine missing person. Thomas Brennan, age 61, experienced hunting guide, hadn't checked in with his wife Margaret for 3 days. His last known position was near Disappointment Creek in the Susitna Valley, where he'd been scouting new territory for his guiding business. The weather had been clear, no storms, no reason for an experienced outdoorsman to go silent. I was finishing paperwork in the Wasilla office when dispatch called it in. Captain Rodriguez looked at the map, looked at me, and said those words that still echo, "Volk, you're taking the rookie." Good opportunity for her to get some wilderness SAR experience. The rookie was Officer Bethany Chen, fresh out of the academy, been with us for all of 3 months. I remember thinking it would be a good training run. Find a hunter who'd probably had a heart attack or taken a bad fall, write it up, be home for dinner. God, I was. Stupid. Stupid and comfortable in my little understanding of how the world worked. 22 years of thinking I knew what was out there in those woods. 22 years of being wrong. I'm going to tell you everything that happened over those 3 days. Every detail I can remember, and thanks to whatever cruel joke nature's playing, the cancer hasn't touched my memory yet. It's all still there, vivid as high-definition video. Sometimes I wish it wasn't, but you need to know, because it's still out there. And the people who covered it up, who sealed that cave and planted those contamination signs, they're counting on you never knowing. Chen was waiting at the Talkeetna station when the helicopter set down to refuel. First thing I noticed was how she had all her gear laid out for inspection without being asked, military habit from her time as an MP in Afghanistan. Everything organized, everything accounted for. She was 26 years old, 5'7", built like someone who took fitness seriously. Later found out she competed in CrossFit events down in Anchorage on weekends. "Officer Chen," I said, extending my hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Corporal Volk, I've heard a lot about you, sir." "Yeah? All bad, I hope." She almost smiled. "They said you wrote the book on wilderness search and rescue up here." "There's no book," I told her as we loaded her gear into the AS-350. "Just experience and luck. The wilderness doesn't care about your credentials." During the 20-minute flight to Brennan's last known position, I had Chen review his file on her tablet. She was thorough, asking the right questions. Portland native, summa cum laude in criminal justice from University of Alaska, top 5% of her academy class. Spoke 3 languages, English, Mandarin from her parents, and Spanish from her deployment. The kind of officer every department wants but few get. "Says here Brennan's been guiding for 15 years, she said, raising her voice over the rotor noise. "No incidents, no complaints. Model safety record." "That's what worries me," I replied. "Watching the spruce forest roll beneath us like a dark ocean. When the careful ones go missing, it's usually something unexpected." Brennan had been running Brennan's backcountry adventures since 2004. Before that, he'd worked the pipeline, made good money, invested it smart. His clients were the high-dollar types, tech executives, overseas hunters wanting their Alaskan trophy. He knew the business and he knew the wilderness. More importantly, he respected both. "His wife reported him missing yesterday morning," Chen continued, scrolling through the report. "He was supposed to check in via satellite phone every evening at 2000 hours. Last contact was October 20th. He mentioned he'd found what he called promising territory near some old mining claims. The pilot, a veteran named Kowalski I'd flown with before, broke in over the intercom. Weather's been clear all week. No storms, no high winds, good visibility." Chen looked at me. "So what happened?" "That's what we're going to find out." The Susitna Valley stretched out below us, endless wilderness punctuated by the occasional glint of water. This was big country, the kind where you could walk for days without seeing another human being. The kind where if something went wrong, nobody would know until it was too late. Brennan's GPS beacon put his base camp 2 miles northeast of Disappointment Creek in a cluster of spruce near the foot of a ridge. It was good positioning, sheltered from wind, close to water, multiple sight lines. The man knew how to pick a campsite. "There," Kowalski pointed. 10 o'clock. I can see his tent. The orange and gray of Brennan's Hilleberg tent stood out against the dark forest. But even from 500 feet up, something looked wrong. The rainfly was flapping loose, torn maybe, and I couldn't see any movement, no smoke from a fire. No sign of Brennan himself. "Set us down in that clearing to the south," I told Kowalski. "We'll walk in from there." As the helicopter descended, Chen was already running through her mental checklist, her hand moving unconsciously to each piece of equipment. Body camera, check. Trauma kit, check. GPS unit, check. She was nervous, but hiding it well. First real wilderness operation. She had no idea what she was about to document. Neither did I. The rotor wash bent the dwarf willows nearly flat as we touched down. The silence that followed when Kowalski killed the engine was absolute, that particular kind of Alaska quiet that makes your ears ring from the absence of sound. "I'll monitor Channel 7, Kowalski said. "Weather's supposed to hold until tomorrow afternoon, but if you need early extract, we'll call. I finished. Give us until dawn tomorrow. If Brennan's hurt, we might need to stabilize him overnight." Chen was already shouldering her pack, adjusting the straps with practiced efficiency. I noticed she'd chosen the tactical flashlight over the standard issue Smart Choice. Better throw, better battery life. We started walking toward Brennan's camp through the low brush. It was 1,430 hours. October 23rd, 2019. We had no idea we were walking into something that had been waiting in these woods far longer than any of us had been alive. The first thing that hit me was how wrong Brennan's camp felt. You develop an instinct. After years of walking into abandoned sites, you can tell the difference between someone who stepped away for 10 minutes and someone who's not coming back. Brennan's camp had that second feeling all over it. His tent was a high-end Hilleberg Nalo 2, the kind of gear serious outdoorsmen invest in. The rainfly was torn in 3 parallel lines, each about 14 inches long, starting from chest height and ripping downward. Not random damage from wind or falling branches. These were deliberate, evenly spaced. Chen was already photographing them, her body camera recording everything. "Bear?" she asked, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "Bears don't leave patterns," I said, running my finger along one of the tiers. The fabric edges were clean, not ragged. Bears tear and pull. This is more like cutting. His Weatherby. 300 Magnum was propped against a spruce tree, fully loaded, safety off. A rifle like that could drop a bull moose at 300 yards, and Brennan had left it behind. Or never got the chance to reach it. The fire pit was cold, maybe 3 days dead. His cooking gear was still out, a jet boil stove, freeze-dried meal packages, a bear canister properly secured 15 yards from the tent. Everything by the book. His sleeping bag was still in the tent, along with his pack. Only things missing were Brennan himself and his satellite phone, which we found in pieces near the fire pit, like someone had taken a hammer to it. "Corporal," Chen called from the edge of camp. "You need to see this." She was crouched near a patch of bare earth where the morning rain had left the ground soft. The track was massive. My hand, with fingers spread, couldn't cover it. 14 inches long, maybe 5 inches wide at the pad, but it was the claw marks that made my mouth go dry. They extended another 3 inches beyond the pad itself, deep gouges in the earth. "That's..." Chen paused, measuring with her multi-tool. "That's bigger than any brown bear track I've seen." "It's not a bear," I said, hearing my own voice sound strange. "Look at the stride pattern. There were more tracks leading away from camp, and the spacing was wrong for a quadruped. Whatever made these was walking on 2 legs. The stride length was nearly 6 feet. I keyed my radio. "Kowalski, this is Volk. Go ahead. We've got an abandoned camp. Signs of struggle. Brennan's not here. We're gonna follow a trail. Might be out of radio range for a bit. Copy that. Weather's holding. You've got about 4 hours of good light." Chen was already repacking some of Brennan's supplies into her pack first aid materials, energy bars, his emergency beacon. Smart thinking. If we found him injured, we'd need everything we could carry. The blood trail started about 30 yards from camp. Not a lot, just drops here and there on leaves and moss. Old blood, oxidized to rust brown. The tracks continued alongside it, and now we could smell something musky, like wet dog, but stronger. Gamier. "You smell that?" Chen asked, wrinkling her nose. "Yeah. Stay close. Keep your hand near your weapon." We followed the trail through dense spruce for about a mile. The forest was too quiet, no squirrels chattering, no birds calling. Even the usual cloud of mosquitoes was absent. Just our breathing and the soft crunch of our boots on dead needles. Chen checked her GPS. "We're heading toward an old geological survey marker. Says here, there were some mining claims in the 1,960 seconds. The smell got stronger as we climbed a small ridge. At the top, we could see a clearing below, and that's where we found him. What was left of him. The fog rolled in while we stood over Brennan's body, turning the forest into a gray wall beyond 30 feet. It was like the wilderness itself was drawing a curtain around us, keeping what we'd found private. Brennan hadn't died easy. The trauma to his body suggested an attack by something large and powerful, massive puncture wounds, consistent with both claws and teeth. But it was what happened after death that made Chen step back and key her body camera to record everything. Someone, or something, had buried him. A cairn of river stones covered most of his torso, each rock deliberately placed. They weren't scattered or piled randomly like you'd see if an animal was caching a kill. These were sorted by size, the largest at the base, smaller ones building up in an almost architectural pattern. It must have taken hours. "Animals don't do this," Chen said quietly. "No," I agreed. "They don't." His left arm was exposed, and I could see defensive wounds, deep gashes along his forearm where he'd tried to protect himself. His jacket was shredded but still partially on him, and in one of the torn pockets, I found his small notebook, the kind guides use to record game movements and weather patterns. The pages were soaked in blood, but some of the writing was still legible. The last entry was dated October 20th, 8:47 p.m. Something outside camp. Not bear. Walks upright. Smells wrong. It's been watching me for 2 days. Found tracks by the creek claws like nothing I've seen. If something happens, tell Margaret. The entry ended mid-sentence. "We need to call this in," Chen said. "Get a full team out here." She was right, but I was looking at those tracks again, fresher ones around Brennan's burial site. Whatever killed him had come back, multiple times, based on the overlapping prints, and the trail continued up the ridge toward what looked like a cliff face through the fog. "We should document the trail while it's fresh," I said, "before the weather changes." Chen looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Sir, with respect, we've got a dead hunter and evidence of a large predator. Protocol says we assess the threat," I interrupted. "If this thing's still in the area, we need to know. The next team needs to know what they're walking into." It was bad reasoning and we both knew it. But something was pulling me toward that cliff face. Call it 22 years of instinct, call it stupidity, but I knew there were answers up there. We marked Brennan's position on GPS and covered him with a space blanket from Chen's pack, weighing it down with more stones. It felt wrong to leave him, but it felt more wrong not to follow this through. The trail led up through stands of Devil's Club and alder, the fog getting thicker as we climbed. The smell was stronger here, that wet dog musk mixed with something else. Decay. Death. Chen stopped suddenly, her hand going to her sidearm. "Listen." I stopped, held my breath. Nothing at first. Then I heard it, a low rumble, almost below the range of hearing. Not quite a growl, not quite a hum. It was coming from ahead of us, where the trees opened up. We moved forward slowly, weapons drawn but pointed down. The fog was so thick now I could barely see Chen 6 feet away. Then the trees ended, and we were standing at the base of a cliff, looking at a cave entrance. The smell hit us like a physical force. Rot. Blood. That animal musk so strong it made my eyes water. Chen pulled out her menthol rub, dabbed it under her nose, passed it to me. It barely helped. The cave mouth was worn smooth, about 8 feet high and 12 feet wide. The ground in front was packed hard, like a game trail, but no game trail I'd ever seen had bones scattered. Around it like this: deer bones, moose bones, and others I couldn't immediately identify, all of them showing teeth marks, all of them cracked open for marrow. We should have left right then. Every instinct I'd developed over 2 decades was screaming at me to get Chen out of there, get back to the helicopter, and let somebody else deal with this. But there's something about being the one who finds the evidence you need to know what it means. Chen had her flashlight out, the tactical one she'd chosen back at the station. The beam cut through the cave mouth's darkness, revealing something that made her hand shake slightly. Skulls. Dozens of deer skulls arranged in perfect rows just inside the entrance, all facing outward. Antlers interlocked in a pattern that looked almost like a fence or a warning. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. I'd seen predator dens before. Bears, wolves, even a mountain lion once. They're messy, random, purely functional. This was different. This was organized. Deliberate. The skulls were sorted by size, the antlers woven together in a way that must have taken intelligence and planning to achieve. "Keep recording," I told Chen. Her body camera was our insurance policy, our proof that we weren't making this up. We stepped inside, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees immediately. Our breath came out in clouds. The smell was overwhelming death and decay mixed with that animal musk, but underneath it all was something else. Something almost chemical, like marking scent, but wrong somehow. The cave opened into a larger chamber about 20 feet in. Our lights played across a scene that my mind still struggles to process. Carcasses everywhere, in various stages of decomposition, but organized into distinct areas. Fresh kills near the left wall, still bloody. Older ones toward the back, mostly stripped to bone. And along the right wall, are those sorted by species? Chen asked, her voice tight. She was right. Deer in one section, moose in another. What looked like black bear remains in a third pile. Each area had its own organization, bones stacked, hides separated, skulls arranged. It would have taken weeks, months maybe, to create this kind of system. My light caught something on the cave wall marks carved into the stone. Not random scratches, but deliberate patterns. Some looked almost like tallies, groups of 4 vertical lines crossed by a 5th. Others were more complex, circular patterns that reminded me of lunar phases. "Corporal," Chen's voice was barely a whisper. Something's moving back there. I turned my light toward the back of the cave, where the chamber narrowed into a tunnel. For just a second, I saw eye shine green, reflective, about 7 feet off the ground. Then it was gone, pulled back into the darkness. We stood frozen, weapons drawn, listening. There was breathing back there, deep and rhythmic. Not the rapid panting of an animal, but something slower, more controlled. And then we heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice. Not human, but trying to be. A low, guttural attempt at words that sounded like someone with a throat full of gravel trying to speak. It wasn't English, wasn't any language I recognized, but it had the cadence of speech, the rise and fall of someone trying to communicate. Chen's hand was trembling now, but she kept her weapon steady, kept her camera pointed at that tunnel. "We need to leave," she said. "Now." But as we started backing toward the entrance, the breathing got louder, and we heard movement, something large, shifting position, claws on stone. It was coming toward us, not rushing, but moving with purpose. That's when we made our choice. Instead of standing our ground, instead of trying to see what would emerge from that tunnel, we ran. The run back to Brennan's camp was a blur of branches, fog, and that sound following us through the trees. Not pursuit exactly, it could have caught us if what it wanted. We both knew that. It was pacing us, keeping distance but staying present, occasionally letting out that horrible vocalization that was almost words. When we reached Brennan's body, Chen spun around, weapon raised, scanning the tree line. I grabbed the radio with shaking hands. "Kowalski, this is Volk. We need immediate extraction." I say again, immediate extraction. Static for a moment. Then, "Copy that. Weather's closing in. I can try, but try hard." I cut him off. "We have one confirmed fatality and an active threat." While we waited, we stood back to back near Brennan's body, weapons drawn, watching the forest. The fog was so thick we couldn't see more than 20 feet, but we could feel it out there. That presence, that intelligence, watching us. "Movement," Chen whispered. 2 o'clock. A shape in the fog, tall and wrong. For just a moment, I saw it clearly, 7 feet tall, hunched forward, covered in dark fur that was matted with something. The head was wrong, elongated like a wolf's but larger, and the eyes showed intelligence. It stood on 2 legs, but the proportions were off. Arms too long, ending in hands that were almost human, except for the massive claws. It looked directly at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. There was recognition there, evaluation, like it was memorizing my face. Then it lifted one of those horrible hand-claw combinations and did something that still haunts me. It pointed, at Chen, then at me, then back toward the cave. "It wants us to follow it," Chen breathed. Before I could respond, we heard the helicopter. The creature's head snapped toward the sound, and it let out a howl that was pure animal fury, mixed with something that sounded almost like frustration. Then it was gone, melting back into the fog like it had never been there. Kowalski had to make 3 attempts to land in the worsening weather. We loaded Brennan's body ourselves, not waiting for proper protocol. As the helicopter lifted off, I looked back and saw 3 of them standing at the edge of the clearing. 3 dark shapes, watching us leave with their kill. "What are those?" Kowalski asked over the intercom. "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. We flew back in silence, Chen reviewing her body camera footage with shaking hands. At one point, she zoomed in on something and went pale. "Sir," she said, showing me the screen. "Look at the cave wall markings." She'd captured a clear image of one section of carved symbols. Among the scratches and tally marks was something that made my stomach drop. Crude but recognizable drawings of human figures. Dozens of them, each one with an X scratched through it. "How long do you think they've been there?" Chen asked. I thought about those old mining claims from the 1960 seconds, about the geological surveys that had mapped these caves, about all the missing hunters and hikers over the years whose bodies were never found. "Longer than we want to know," I told her. The helicopter banked hard as we hit turbulence, and through the window, I could see the Susitna Valley disappearing beneath clouds. Somewhere down there in caves we'd barely explored were creatures that had been watching us, studying us, keeping count of us, and now they knew we'd found them. The helicopter touched down at Talkeetna in driving rain. Within minutes, the landing pad was swarming with state troopers, EMTs, and someone else, men in unmarked black rain gear, who moved with military precision and didn't identify themselves. They took control of the scene immediately, corralling us into separate debriefing rooms before we could even process what had happened. I spent 3 hours in that room, telling my story to a man who never gave his name but had federal credentials that superseded my authority. He was polite, professional, and completely unsurprised by anything I told him. When I described the creatures, he just nodded and made notes on a tablet. When I mentioned the cave organization, the sorted bones, the carved symbols, he asked for specific details but showed no shock. "Has Officer Chen's body camera footage been uploaded to your servers?" he asked. "It should be uploading automatically," I said. "Standard protocol." He made another note. "We'll need all original files transferred to our custody. This is now classified under the Wildlife Disease Control Act." "What disease?" I asked. "Those weren't diseased animals. They were Corporal Volk," he interrupted, his tone still pleasant but firm. "Thomas Brennan was killed by a rabid bear. The unusual behavior you observed was consistent with late-stage rabies affecting multiple animals in the area. The cave will be sealed as a contamination site. That's the finding that will appear in all reports." "That's not what we saw." He leaned forward slightly. "What you saw was traumatic. Trauma affects memory, perception. Officer Chen is young, inexperienced. Her footage is unclear due to fog and poor lighting conditions. Expert analysis will show diseased bears, nothing more." Through the window, I could see Chen in another room, talking to another federal agent. She was shaking her head, gesturing emphatically. Her interviewer was showing her something on a laptop screen, probably her own footage, pointing at things, offering explanations that I could see her rejecting. "There were symbols on the cave walls," I insisted. "Tool use. Organization that animals aren't capable of. Pareidolia," he said smoothly. "The human tendency to see patterns where none exist. Like seeing faces in clouds. Very common in high-stress situations." He pushed a document across the table. A non-disclosure agreement, dense with legal text, citing national security and public safety. The compensation package attached was generous immediate medical retirement with full benefits, a substantial bonus for service above and beyond, and continued health coverage that would cover my cancer treatments. "Your diagnosis must be weighing on you," he said, though I hadn't mentioned my recent doctor visits to anyone. "The treatments available through the federal medical program are cutting edge, much better success rates than standard care." The threat was politely delivered but clear. Sign and get treatment. Don't sign and... "What about Chen?" I asked. "Officer Chen is being offered a promotion and transfer to Anchorage. Better opportunities for advancement. She's young, has a bright future ahead of her." He paused. "As long as she makes the right choices." I signed. God help me, I signed. What else could I do? Fight federal agents while dying of cancer. Destroy Chen's career trying to prove something nobody would believe. But I kept copies. Before they scrubbed the servers, before they classified everything, I'd already downloaded Chen's raw footage to a personal drive. 5 years I've kept it. Hidden. 5 years of watching those few clear frames, of that thing looking at us with too much intelligence, pointing at us with those impossible hands. The cleanup happened fast. By the next morning, the Susitna Valley site was locked down. Military contractors, hazmat teams, concrete trucks. They poured tons of concrete into that cave system, sealed every entrance they could find. The official story was elegant in its simplicity: rabies outbreak, contamination risk, area quarantined indefinitely for public safety. Margaret Brennan received a visit that same day. Federal wildlife officials, they told her, expressing condolences and explaining how Thomas had been killed by a rabid bear. The life insurance payout was expedited, tripled, due to the Act of Nature clause. All she had to do was sign a simple form agreeing not to discuss the case publicly, standard procedure in wildlife disease incidents. She signed too. We all signed. We took their money and their threats and their explanations, and we kept quiet while they buried the truth under concrete and paperwork. 3 weeks after signing that NDA, I couldn't stop myself. I drove back to the Susitna Valley, parked my truck 5 miles from the restricted zone, and hiked in before dawn. I had to see what they'd done, had to know if it was really over. The transformation was stunning. The entire area around the cave had been clear-cut in a 100-yard radius, the ground scraped down to bedrock and covered with gravel. The cave entrance wasn't just sealed, it was entombed. A concrete structure 3 feet thick extended into the cliff face, with rebar reinforcement visible through sections. Warning signs in 3 languages declared the area contaminated, hazardous, fatal to enter. Motion sensors and trail cameras were mounted on posts throughout the clearing. But they'd missed something. Or maybe they just didn't care about one old trooper poking around. About 200 yards north of the main cave, partially hidden by a fallen spruce, I found another opening. Smaller, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, but the edges were worn smooth like the main entrance. The same smell wafted out musk and decay and something alive. I sat there for an hour, watching that opening, part of me hoping something would emerge so I'd know I wasn't crazy. Part of me terrified of exactly that. Nothing came out, but I heard things. Movement deep in the rock, that same rhythmic breathing we'd heard before, and once, just once, that vocalization that was almost speech. I left markers, subtle ones, a specific arrangement of rocks that would be disturbed if anything passed through. When I came back a month later, they'd been moved. Not scattered, but repositioned, formed into a pattern that mirrored my original but added to it, made it more complex. Whatever was down there had found my markers, understood them as communication, and responded. That's when I started my real investigation. Off the books, on my own time, paying for information with my retirement money, I found things the federal cleanup crew either missed or didn't care about. The geological surveys from 1973 had a footnote about anomalous biological remains in the cave system, bone fragments that didn't match any known species. The surveyor who wrote that note, Dr. James Morrison, died in a car accident 2 weeks after filing his report. Single vehicle, perfect weather, no explanation. Indigenous stories, never written down but passed through generations, talked about the long-toothed ones, or the first hunters, beings that were here before humans, that walked upright but weren't men, that could speak but chose not to. The stories always ended the same way: leave them alone, don't enter their places, and if you hear them trying to talk, run. A geneticist named Dr. Angela Foster analyzed hair samples from a supposed Bigfoot encounter near Denali in 2015. Her preliminary findings suggested an unknown primate, possibly a remnant population of something that should have gone extinct thousands of years ago. 2 days after she posted her initial data online, federal agents seized her lab, destroyed her samples, and revoked her research grants. She works as a high school biology teacher now, won't even discuss genetics anymore. There were other missing persons cases, carefully buried in bureaucracy. A family of 4 in 2008 vanished from their campsite near the same valley. A geological survey team in 1991, 3 men who walked into those woods and never came out. A native elder in 2001 who went to pay respects to the old ones and was found 3 weeks later catatonic, who spent his last years in a psychiatric facility drawing the same image over and over: tall figures with wolf heads and human hands. The pattern was clear once you looked for it. Every 10 to 15 years, someone got too close to the truth, and the machine activated. Silence them with money or threats, classify the evidence, seal the sites, wait for people to forget. But the creatures were still there, had always been there, living in cave systems that probably extended for miles underground. Chen contacted me only once, 6 months after the incident. A single text from a burner phone. Saw 3 more on trail cams near Denali. Same size, same intelligence. Orders to delete and forget. They're not just in Susitna. I never heard from her again. Her number was disconnected the next day. We should have run the moment we entered that cave. Every survival instinct I'd ever developed was screaming at us to get out. But there's something about being a cop. You train yourself to move toward danger, to document it, to understand it. That training almost got us killed. Chen's camera was still recording as we moved deeper into the main chamber, past the organized carcasses, past the carved symbols on the walls. The tunnel at the back narrowed to about 5 feet wide, and the smell coming from it was different, fresher somehow, like whatever lived here spent most of its time in those deeper passages. "We should mark this position and come back with a team," Chen whispered. But even as she said it, we both heard the movement again. Closer this time. Something large shifting its weight, claws scraping on stone, with a sound like knives on a whetstone. Then we saw it. Chen's tactical light caught it, arranging a deer carcass against the far wall of a side chamber. We hadn't noticed a natural alcove about 20 feet deep. For a few seconds, it didn't realize we were there, and we got to watch it work. The methodical way it positioned the deer's legs, the almost careful placement of the head. It was using its hands, and they were hands, not paws, despite the massive claws extending from each digit. The creature was massive, maybe 7 feet tall, but hunched forward in a way that suggested it could unfold to something even larger. Dark. Fur covered its body, matted in places, with what looked like dried blood or mud. The torso was wrong, too long, too narrow, like someone had taken a human frame and stretched it. But it was the head that made my breath stop. A wolf's skull, but scaled up, elongated, with a snout that seemed too articulated, too expressive. The jaw moved with precision as it made small sounds to itself, while working not quite words, but with the rhythm of speech, like someone humming while concentrating on a task. Jesus Christ, Chen breathed, and the creature's head snapped toward us. For 3, maybe 4 seconds, we stood frozen in mutual recognition. Its eyes caught Chen's light and reflected back green, but there was something behind that reflection. Intelligence, assessment. The same look you'd see in a person's eyes when they're evaluating a threat, making calculations, deciding on a course of action. It straightened slowly, rising to its full height, and I realized it had been crouching the whole time we'd watched it. Those elongated arms hung past its knees, ending in hands that were grotesque parodies of human ones, 5 fingers with joints that bent correctly, but twice as long as they should be, tipped with claws that had to be 4 inches long, tools and weapons combined. "Back away," I said quietly, my hand moving to my Glock. Slowly. The creature tilted its head, and I swear it understood me. Not just the tone, the words. It shifted its weight, and I could see powerful muscles moving under the fur, could see intelligence in the way it positioned itself between us and the carcass it had been arranging. Territorial. Protective of its work. Then it opened its mouth and made a sound that still haunts my nightmares. It started as a howl, low and reverberating through the cave. But halfway through, the pitch changed, modulated, and I heard syllables. Actual syllables attempting to form words with a throat that wasn't built for human speech. It sounded like someone trying to talk through a mouthful of gravel, but the intention was unmistakable. Yi, A-A-A-V-V-V. Leave. It was trying to tell us to leave. Chen's camera caught all the creature's mouth moving with deliberate effort, the frustration in its eyes when the sounds didn't come out right, the way it gestured with one of those massive hands toward the cave entrance in an unmistakably human motion. "It's talking," Chen whispered, her voice shaking. "Oh God, it's trying to talk to us." The creature took a step forward, and I saw others moving in the shadows behind it. Smaller figures, maybe 5.5 to 6 feet tall, emerging from the deeper tunnels. A family group, I realized with sick certainty. We'd walked into their home, and they were deciding whether we were a threat worth eliminating. "We're leaving," I said, speaking directly to the creature, watching its eyes to see if it understood. "We're going now. We won't hurt you." It made another sound, that horrible attempt at speech. Hugu, who backed out of that cave, like our lives depended on it, because they did. The creature, the alpha, I guess you'd call it, followed us to the entrance but didn't pursue beyond it. It stood in the cave mouth, silhouetted against the darkness behind it, watching us retreat through the fog with those reflective green eyes. The smaller ones, 3 of them that I could count, stayed in the shadows, but I could hear them communicating low vocalizations that had structure, cadence, like a conversation in a language I couldn't understand. "Keep moving," I told Chen, my weapon drawn but pointed down. Shooting it felt wrong now, like shooting a person, and besides, I doubted my 10mm would do much more than enrage it. "Don't run, don't show fear." "Too late for that," Chen said, but she kept her pace steady, her camera still recording everything behind us as we backed away. We made it maybe 100 yards before. The creature released another of those howls, this one pure animal, raw and furious. The sound echoed through the forest, and I heard answering calls from at least 2 other directions, not echoes. Other creatures, communicating across distance. There's more than one group, Chen said. They're telling each other about us. The fog had thickened as the temperature dropped with approaching dusk. Visibility was down to 20 feet, maybe less. We couldn't see them, but we could feel them out there, moving parallel to our path back to Brennan's camp. Occasionally, we'd catch a glimpse through the fog, a massive silhouette loping between trees with that distinctive hunched gait, or the sound of something large moving through brush with surprising stealth. By the time we reached Brennan's camp, full darkness had fallen. The temperature had dropped to maybe 20 degrees, and our breath came out in clouds. Chen immediately started pulling supplies from Brennan's tent, his sleeping bag, extra clothing, anything that might help us survive the night. The helicopter can't fly in this fog, I said, checking my radio. No signal. The terrain was blocking us, or maybe the weather. We're here until dawn. We reinforced the tent as best we could, with rope from Brennan's pack, staked it down with extra rocks, and moved all our gear inside. Chen's body camera was at 30% battery. My flashlight had maybe 2 hours left. We rationed what we had and prepared to wait. They came just after midnight. I woke to Chen gripping my arm, her hand trembling. "Listen," she whispered, breathing, heavy and deliberate, right outside the tent. Something was circling the perimeter, stopping every few feet to huff at the thin nylon walls. I could see the tent fabric move inward slightly with each exhalation, could smell that musky scent even through the material. "Don't move," I breathed. "Don't make a sound." For 10 minutes, it circled. Then another joined. Yet the breathing came from 2 different directions, perfectly coordinated. They were testing us, learning our defenses, figuring out how easy we'd be to extract from this shelter. Then came a sound that made my blood freeze. A voice from the darkness, that same guttural attempt at speech we'd heard in the cave. "In, there. It knows we're in here," Chen whispered. "It's telling the others." A massive hand pressed against the tent wall near my head. I could see 5 distinct fingers through the nylon, each one tipped with a claw that could shred the fabric in seconds. It pressed gently, almost experimentally, feeling where we were, learning the barrier between us. "Corporal." Chen's voice was barely audible. "I think there's more than 2. She was right. As my eyes adjusted, I could see multiple shapes moving around the tent, 4 or 5 at least, different sizes, suggesting different ages. The breathing came from all directions now, and I could hear them, communicating with each other, low vocalizations, almost planning sounds. One of them tested the tent stakes, pulling at a guy line until it went taut. They were intelligent enough to understand the structure, to look for weak points. The rear stake started pulling free from the rocky ground. Chen moved to the center. "Stay away from the walls." We huddled together in the middle of the tent, weapons drawn, knowing how useless they'd be if those creatures decided to come through the nylon. Hours crawled by. They never stopped circling, never stopped testing, but they never attacked either. Around 3 in the morning, Chen grabbed my arm again. "Do you hear that?" One of them was making a different sound, not hostile, not threatening, almost curious. And I realized it was trying to copy Chen's voice from earlier, playing back sounds it had heard. "Gee, sus. They're learning from us," Chen whispered. "They're learning how we talk." The longest night of my life ended when the first gray light appeared on the horizon. As dawn broke, the creatures withdrew into the forest. I saw them clearly in those last moments before they disappeared, 5 distinct individuals, different sizes, moving with coordinated purpose back toward the ridge and their caves. The largest one stopped at the tree line and looked back at us. Even from 50 yards away, I could see intelligence in its eyes, and something else. Patience. Like it knew we'd be back, or others would come, and it could wait. It had always waited. The helicopter found us at 0645 hours, both of us exhausted, hypothermic, and alive. Kowalski sat down in the same clearing we'd used the day before, his face tight with concern when he saw our condition. We were covered in dirt and sweat despite the freezing temperature, our uniforms torn from branches, our eyes red from lack of sleep. "You both look like hell," Kowalski said over the intercom as we loaded Brennan's body. "What happened out there?" "Large predators," I said, keeping it vague. "Multiple animals, aggressive behavior. We'll brief at the station." Chen said nothing, just stared out the window at the forest below, her hand unconsciously touching the body camera on her chest. The footage was still there, still holding evidence of what we'd seen, but we never made it to the station. 20 minutes into the flight, dispatch redirected us to coordinates near Palmer, where 3 black SUVs were waiting on a private airstrip. Men in civilian clothes, but with military bearing, surrounded the helicopter before the rotors stopped. They moved with practiced coordination, each one knowing their role. No wasted movement, no unnecessary communication. The one in charge was mid-40s, gray at the temples, expensive outdoor clothing, too clean for someone who actually worked in wilderness. He approached with federal credentials in a leather case. The agency listed was U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but the badge looked wrong, too generic, like a prop. Corporal Volk, Officer Chen, I'm going to need you to come with us for debriefing. This incident falls under federal jurisdiction as of 0400 this morning. Since when does a state trooper missing persons case fall under federal jurisdiction? I asked. Since always, Corporal. The Susitna Valley contains federally protected species and falls under provisions of the Wildlife Disease Control Act. We'll explain everything. Right now, we need to secure your evidence and get your statements while they're fresh. It wasn't a request. Chen and I were separated immediately, before we could coordinate stories or even make eye contact. They took her to one building, me to another, both prefabricated structures that looked recently erected. Through the window, I watched as a specialized team swarmed the helicopter, removing our gear, Brennan's body, every piece of equipment. They worked with practiced efficiency, photographing everything, placing items in sealed evidence bags. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. The federal agent, he never gave his name, listened to my account without interruption. He made notes on a tablet, occasionally asking for clarification. The exact dimensions of the tracks, the precise cave layout, the number of creatures I'd seen. He had me describe the vocalizations 3 times, timing how long each one lasted. What struck me most was his complete lack of surprise. Not once did he question my sanity or suggest I might be mistaken. He just nodded and took notes, like I was describing a traffic accident. What you encountered, he finally said, was a bear family group affected by late-stage rabies. The unusual behavior, the vocalizations, the apparent intelligence, the organized cave, that's all consistent with severe neurological damage from the disease. That's not what we saw, I said flatly. With respect, Corporal, you were operating under extreme stress in low visibility conditions. Officer Chen is 26, 3 months out of the academy, on her first wilderness operation. Human perception is unreliable in crisis situations. He slid a document across the table. Non-disclosure agreement with a generous compensation package, immediate medical retirement with full benefits, substantial cash settlement, and enrollment in a federal medical program for my cancer treatments. Your diagnosis must be weighing heavily, he said, though I'd never mentioned my recent oncology appointments. Our program offers cutting-edge treatments, much better survival rates than standard care. The threat was delivered with a smile, but it was still a threat. What happens if I don't sign? Then you write your report with no evidence, because we've secured everything under federal authority. You'll sound like a man with terminal cancer making wild claims. Officer Chen's career will be derailed, and Thomas Brennan's widow won't receive her insurance payout, because the case will remain open, contested, unresolved. He leaned back, almost sympathetic. Or you sign, take the compensation, get treatment, and let us handle a situation we've been managing for a very long time. Nobody wins if this goes public, Corporal. I signed. God help me, I signed. They let me stay in the helicopter while the cleanup operation unfolded below. For 4 hours, I watched the most efficient cover-up I've ever witnessed, circling the Susitna Valley site at 500 feet. The area was already swarming with personnel, easily 40 or 50 people, all moving with military coordination. Black SUVs and unmarked trucks formed a perimeter. A mobile command center had been erected near the tree line, satellite dishes making it look like a forward operating base. The teams wore full hazmat suits with independent air supplies. They entered the cave in groups of 3, staying inside exactly 15 minutes before rotating out. Each team emerged carrying sealed containers, some small enough for tissue samples, others large enough for skulls or bone structures. Everything was tagged, photographed, and loaded into refrigerated trucks with government plates but no agency markings. How long have they been doing this? I asked the pilot, a different one this time, younger, with the flat affect of someone who'd signed his own NDA years ago. He didn't answer, just adjusted our altitude as another helicopter carrying concrete mixing equipment moved into position. The concrete operation told me everything. They weren't just sealing the cave, they were entombing it. A drilling team had installed rebar reinforcement 20 feet into the rock face. The cement mixer was industrial grade, and they pumped concrete for hours. I watched it flow in, imagining it pushing through chambers, filling tunnels, forcing into every crack where something might hide. By noon, the cave entrance was completely sealed, a professional concrete wall 3 feet thick, reinforced with steel, designed to last decades. They'd mixed the concrete with aggregate that made it blend with surrounding rock. Within a year, moss would grow over it, and nobody would know it had been modified. But they weren't done. Heavy equipment rolled in excavators and bulldozers hauling topsoil and young trees. They were landscaping, erasing evidence of disturbed earth, planting vegetation that would grow over their work. The area was saturated with trail cameras, motion sensors, and seismic monitors. They were creating a surveillance perimeter. Teams fanned out with metal detectors and evidence flags, recovering every piece of Brennan's scattered equipment, every shell casing, every scrap of fabric. They were sanitizing the entire scene, removing any trace that anything unusual had happened in this valley. Around 1,400 hours, we returned to Palmer. Chen was already gone. The federal coordinator told me she'd accepted immediate reassignment to Anchorage, with a promotion. Better opportunities for career advancement, he said. Fresh start after a traumatic incident. I never saw her again. Just that one text 6 months later from a burner phone. Saw 3 more on trail cams near Denali. Same size, same intelligence. Orders to delete and forget. They're not just in Susitna. Then her number was disconnected. They gave me a commendation the following week, certificate of valor, promotion to sergeant I'd never serve, and a handshake from the federal coordinator. The morphine prescription came through the federal medical program, high-grade pharmaceuticals, better than anything through state insurance. My cancer treatment was scheduled at a Seattle facility specializing in experimental protocols. The official report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic misdirection, animal attack, probable rabies exposure, contamination risk requiring quarantine. No mention of tracks, organized caves, or creatures that tried to speak. Just a tragic accident in Alaska's wilderness. Margaret Brennan received notification, along with life insurance paperwork already expedited. The payout was triple the policy value, $1.2 million, with one condition: sign a statement agreeing not to discuss Thomas's death. The money appeared within 72 hours. She signed, took the money, paid off their house, set up college funds for grandchildren. I don't blame her. The Susitna Valley incident was buried under paperwork, entombed under concrete, and forgotten by everyone except those who'd lived it. But the creatures in those caves, they were still there, still watching, still waiting with that terrible patience. 3 weeks after signing that NDA, I couldn't stop myself. I drove back to the Susitna Valley, parked my truck 5 miles from the restricted zone, and hiked in before dawn. I had to see what they'd done, had to know if it was really over. The transformation was stunning. The entire area around the cave had been clear-cut in a 100-yard radius, the ground scraped to bedrock and covered with gravel. The cave entrance wasn't just sealed, it was entombed. A concrete structure 3 feet thick extended into the cliff face, with rebar reinforcement visible through sections. Warning signs in 3 languages declared the area contaminated, hazardous, fatal to enter. Motion sensors and trail cameras were mounted throughout the clearing. But they'd missed something. About 200 yards north of the main cave, partially hidden by a fallen spruce, I found another opening. Smaller, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, but the edges were worn smooth like the main entrance. The same smell wafted out musk and decay and something alive. I sat there for an hour, watching that opening. Nothing emerged, but I heard things. Movement deep in the rock, that same rhythmic breathing. And once, just once, that vocalization that was almost speech. I left markers. A specific arrangement of rocks that would be disturbed if anything passed through. When I came back a month later, they'd been moved. Not scattered, but repositioned, formed into a pattern that mirrored mine, but added to it, made it more complex. Whatever was down there had found my markers. understood them as communication, and responded. That's when I started my real investigation. Off the books, on my own time, paying for information with retirement money, I found things the federal cleanup crew either missed or didn't care about. Geological surveys from 1973 had a footnote about anomalous biological remains in the cave system. The surveyor who wrote that note, Dr. James Morrison, died in a car accident 2 weeks after filing his report. Single vehicle, perfect weather, no explanation. Indigenous stories talked about the long-toothed ones, who were here before humans, who walked upright but weren't men, who could speak but chose not to. The stories always ended the same way: leave them alone, and if you hear them trying to talk, run. A geneticist named Dr. Angela Foster analyzed hair samples from a supposed Bigfoot encounter near Denali in 2015. Her preliminary findings suggested an unknown primate, possibly a remnant population of something that should have gone extinct thousands of years ago. 2 days after posting her data online, federal agents seized her lab, destroyed her samples, and revoked her research grants. She teaches high school biology now, won't discuss genetics anymore. There were other missing persons cases, carefully buried in bureaucracy. A family of 4 in 2008 vanished from their campsite near the same valley. A geological survey team in 1991, 3 men who walked into those woods and never came out. A native elder in 2001 who went to pay respects to the old ones and was found 3 weeks later, catatonic, who spent his last years drawing the same image-tall figures with wolf heads and human hands. The pattern was clear. Every 10 to 15, 2 years, someone got too close to the truth, and the machine activated. Silence them with money or threats, classify the evidence, seal the sites, wait for people to forget. But the creatures were still there, had always been there, living in cave systems that probably extended for miles underground. Chen contacted me only once, 6 months after the incident. That single text from the burner phone, then silence. I tried to respond, but the number was dead. I kept copies of everything I found: survey reports, missing person files, Chen's original body camera footage that I downloaded before they scrubbed the servers. All of it hidden in a safety deposit box with instructions to my lawyer to release it upon my death. The cancer progressed, despite the federal treatments. Maybe they were never meant to save me, just keep me quiet long enough to forget, to lose credibility as the disease took my strength. But it hasn't taken my memory. Every detail is still sharp, still clear. I received anonymous warnings over the years, notes left on my truck windshield in parking lots, a phone call from a blocked number advising me to let the past stay buried. Once, I came home to find my apartment had been searched, nothing taken, nothing obviously disturbed, but I could tell someone had been through my files, my computer, testing to see what I still had. They're watching me even now, probably, waiting to see if I'll break my silence, ready to discredit or silence me if I do. But what can they do to a man who's already dying? Take away the months I have left? I'm past caring about their threats. I'm writing this from Providence Medical Center in Anchorage, surrounded by machines that beep and hum, monitoring the slow shutdown of my body. The morphine keeps the pain manageable, but it can't touch the memories. They're still sharp as the day they happened, still vivid enough that I can smell that cave, hear those vocalizations, see those green eyes reflecting in Chen's flashlight. The doctors give me 2 weeks, maybe 3. The federal treatments bought me time, 5 years, instead of the 3 months I was originally given, but the cancer always wins eventually. I've made my peace with that. What I haven't made peace with is dying while keeping their secret. So I'm breaking my silence. This testimony, along with copies of Chen's body camera footage, geological surveys, missing person reports, and everything else I've collected over 5 years, is being released to multiple sources with instructions to publish upon my death. Let them try to discredit a dead man. Let them try to seal this truth like they sealed that cave. My theory, for what it's worth, from a dying cop who saw something he can't explain, these creatures, whether ancient primates, evolutionary offshoots, or something else entirely, have always been here. They're intelligent enough to remain hidden, organized enough to maintain territories, and protected by authorities, who've decided the public can't handle the truth. Maybe they're right. Maybe knowing that something like that exists in our wilderness would cause panic, would empty our national forests, would fundamentally change how we see our place in the natural world. But people deserve to know. Hunters deserve to know. Families planning camping trips deserve to know that when the forest goes silent and you smell that musky odor and you find tracks that don't match any animal in the field, guides trust your instincts and leave. Thomas Brennan deserved better than a cover story about rabid bears. His widow deserved the truth about what killed her husband. Officer Chen deserved to not spend the rest of her career haunted by what she documented and was forced to forget. I've thought a lot about that moment in the cave when the creature looked at me, really looked at me, with intelligence and assessment and something that might have been curiosity. In that brief exchange, I saw recognition. It knew I was sentient, capable of thought, worth evaluating as either threat or opportunity, and I saw calculation, like it was weighing options, making decisions based on complex reasoning. But worst of all, I saw patience. Ancient, terrible patience. Like it knew that humans were temporary visitors in a domain that had belonged to something else far longer than we've existed. Like it could wait us out, watch us come and go, and still be there in those caves long after our cities crumble and our roads disappear back into wilderness. That's what haunts me most. Not that we found them, but that they've been watching us all along, studying us, learning our language, understanding our weaknesses. And when that concrete finally crumbles, when those surveillance systems fail, when the federal agents who sealed that cave are long dead, they'll still be there, waiting.